Well, I still, we still have a lot
From Australia.
we don't get that much. All our bills are on that. So I'm gonna check it a couple times a week. I've worked there for 16 years. Now I work for 16 years. And I worked
Beautiful rose so bright, beautiful land of light, beautiful home so bright, where there shall no night, beautiful crown I wear, shining and bright, over there yonder in mansions, fair gatherers there, beautiful rose, beautiful land. Beautiful home, beautiful land, beautiful crown, shining so fair, beautiful mansion, bright gatherers fair. Now we sing this song from memory most of the time. Notice in the third system across the page where it says shining and bright o'er there, yonder in mansions fair. This is what we usually sing. Shining and bright o'er there, yonder in mansions fair. It's not, that's go. Doesn't go all that high. Shining and bright o'er there, yonder in mansions fair. Different. Gatherers there. Tell the difference? So say it right, or I'll stop you again. Beautiful thought to be, we shall forever be thine in eternity. When from this world we're free, free from its toil and care, heavenly joys to share. Let me cross over there, my prayer. Beautiful rose, beautiful land. Beautiful home, beautiful land, beautiful crown, shining so fair, beautiful mansion, bright gatherers fair, beautiful things on high, over in yonder sky, thus I shall leave this shore, counting my treasures o'er, where we shall never die. Carry me by and by, never to sorrow more. Heavenly shore, beautiful road, beautiful land, beautiful home, beautiful land, beautiful crown, shining so fair, beautiful mansion, bright gatherers there. Love that song. All right. That's not the song. 803. This has one of the most beautiful alto lines of any song in the book. And the altos have the lead in the chorus. So we need to back down and let the altos sing out loud, okay? Out of the ivory palaces into a world of woe. Only His great eternal love made my Savior go. That was the alto line. Didn't sound like the lead line, did it? This is the key of E. Do, so. My Lord has garments so wondrous fine, and perfect texture fills. Its fragrance reach to this heart. great eternal love, make my Savior whole. My life had also its sorrows sore, for hours had apart. And when I think of that cross he bore, my eyes with tears the palaces into a world of woe. Only His great eternal love make my Savior whole. In garments glorious He will come to open wide the door, and I shall enter my heavenly home to dwell forevermore. Out of the palaces into a world of woe. Only His great eternal love make my Savior whole. Wasn't that pretty? It's a pretty song. All right. Well, I hope that y'all don't get mad at me. Don't remember these?
I'm not that Savior, I'm going back to it.
We're going to go slower, and it's not going to be the whole class. What I want you to do is to commit to memory each one of these clocks, everything that is on that clock. By the way, I need a young person. There's no young people. Jody, can you go out to my truck? And I think on the console, between the seats, is a packet of pictures, photographs. I think I may have not brought them home.
Hey, Coach,
Yes.
I still have this diagram done up, and I can print off copies
Yeah.
and bring them from.
Well, I've got them. I made a picture of this particular clock that you can take home. I paid 34 cents a piece for y'all to have. I'm telling you, I just nearly went broke. So actually, I spent more than that because I sent them to Office Depot, and they said it wouldn't be ready till 2 weeks. I'm like, who sends stuff in for 2 weeks ahead? So I sent them to CVS. They were done within 45 minutes. So anyway, notice this clock is so important that you learn each period of the clock, where they fit. Antediluvian at 1 o'clock, post-diluvian at 2 o'clock, patriarchal age at 3 o'clock, Egyptian bondage, yay, it was in there. Egyptian bondage and Exodus at 4 o'clock, You can hand those out if you want to.
Teacher's
Yeah.
pet.
5 o'clock is wilderness wanderings. 6 o'clock is the conquest of the land of Canaan. 7 o'clock, Judges. 8 o'clock, United Kingdom. 9 o'clock, divided kingdom. 10 o'clock, Judah alone by itself. Then captivity, both Israel and Judah are in captivity. And then 12 o'clock is the restoration. Everybody's back together, they're in their land. So, here we go. At 1 o'clock, can you remember what's at 1 o'clock? Antediluvian, which means before the flood. That's right. That's a fancy word. 2 fancy words, ante, before, diluvian or deluge, flood. 2 o'clock. After the flood, post-diluvian. And then 3 o'clock is the patriarchal. What does patriarchal mean? The fathers. It's the period of time when God spoke to the fathers. And there wasn't a particular law that was given. That would come later on. 4 o'clock, Egyptian bondage. 5 o'clock, wilderness wandering. Right. They have left Egypt. They didn't get to go into the promised land. Wilderness wandering. 6 o'clock, conquest of the land of Canaan, led by Joshua. And that will help you if you remember Joshua. What book comes after Joshua? Judges, and that's hour 7. It was the period of the Judges, they were led by the Judges. Then chapter 8. Then 8 o'clock is the United Kingdom. They're under 3 kings: Saul, David, and Solomon, united together. After Solomon's son Rehoboam comes to the throne, it's divided between he and Jeroboam. Seems like they would be brothers with names that similar, but they're not. And then we have divided kingdom at 9 o'clock. There are 2 kings now for the two different kingdoms. 10 tribes to the north, 2 tribes to the south. 10 o'clock, what is that? Judah by itself. Israel, the 10 tribes of Israel go into Assyrian captivity, and then Judah is all by itself. How many good kings were there in Israel? None. Zilch. There were some in Judah, some really good kings in Judah. Then at 11 o'clock, what happens at 11 o'clock? Everyone's in captivity now, Babylonian captivity. And we'll remember Daniel is real important during that time of captivity. That's at 11 o'clock. 12 o'clock, restoration. Everybody goes home. Now, this is just Old Testament history. If we don't have a good concept of what happens around that clock, it's really going to help you to be able to put people in the right place. It's going to help you to understand what law they're under. It's going to help you to understand what nation they're in. Are they under Egyptian rule? Are they under Babylonian rule? Are they under the United Kingdom? Have they gone into apostasy? Those things really matter. And if you have that in your head and you can hold that, it really will make your Bible study a whole lot more fulfilling and interesting. But as some of you said, it was kind of like that little boy, that when the preacher was done preaching, the mother came out and said, "Preacher, that was so fulfilling. So fulfilling. It was just so fulfilling." And the little boy looked up and said, "Yeah, I got my belly full too." And sometimes we feel that way, don't we? We get to the point that it's just too much. But we're going to go slow and make sure everybody knows the clock all the way around. And then we're going to add. If you went through and just added everything to 1 o'clock, if you put Adam and Eve and the flood and all of that prior to that, all in 1 o'clock, it'd take you forever to get back to the restoration, and you would lose interest. So that's why we want to know specifically what happens. Have you ever been mistreated? A time or two. It hurts. There is something about man's inhumanity to man that God truly frowns upon. In fact, he says that we cannot truly love him if we don't love each other. And the way that we show that we love God is by taking care of each other. And that's not always the case with the way people treat each other. And here in John chapter 9 is a very interesting interaction of Jesus with a man who's been mistreated by several different groups of people. And we're going to see how Jesus interacts with him. We're going to see how the people interact with him. And it's amazing that the guy stays upbeat and wise about the whole thing. He's the only one in the story besides Jesus that really has a good optimistic outlook. By the way, Johnny Ramsey used to say it's hard to be an optimist if you have misty optics. So he wasn't a crybaby. He was born blind, but he didn't let that keep him down at all. Did you know that there are no Old Testament examples of someone who was blind being healed? Can you think of any? I couldn't think of any. There's no example of the Lord's disciples healing someone who is blind. The closest you can come to is when Ananias came to Paul and he was healed, but it wasn't Ananias laying hands on him or anything that healed him. It seemed like it's the power of God that does that. So Saul of Tarsus is the closest thing that we have. Isaiah chapter, yes, ma'am.
What did you say about in the Old Testament?
There are no examples of a blind person being given their sight.
Okay.
Prophecy actually reveals that this would be a mark of the Messiah, that he would cause the blind to see, the deaf to hear, the lame will walk again. This was a mark of the coming of the Messiah. So Jesus was the one who was able to heal the blind. As in any case with Jesus, when he encounters anyone who is hurting in any way, how does he treat people? He's keenly aware of what they need the most. And he goes to the source of the problem and loves them and cares for them and tries to eliminate the problem so that he can bring them to the Father. And that should be the way that we are. Jeremiah said in Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9 about the hearts of man. He said, the heart of man is most deceitful and desperately wicked. When you think about man's inhumanity to man, history has showed some really horrible people being horrible to other people. You think of the Holocaust, you think of Pol Pot killing millions of people. That was in our lifetime. I was a kid. Yeah, look what Vladimir Putin. I think he's kind of messed up in the head like Adolf Hitler was. He's too full of himself.
He runs in the same line as Stalin.
Stalin was that.
Stalin was terrible.
Yeah. Did you know that a lot of people think, and Doc, you might be able to help us out on this, that Hitler probably was addicted to methamphetamine? And it
Yeah,
caused him to do that.
They made and used a ton, amphetamines were manufactured in Germany
For
from
their
the war
soldiers.
starting, their first products were starting around 1903. And they actually commercialized and experimented with it heavily in the military through 1917.
So that there's,
So they had tons of experience with
Yes.
amphetamines.
so that they
In
would
all
really
levels
be
of
violent and full of energy and not thinking for themselves. They would be easily manipulated. Yes? What did you say? What did you say?
And paranoid.
Yeah, paranoid, yeah. But Jesus is far different from that. We see Jesus as being available to people. He's sensitive to people's problems. He's helpful every time, and he's creative. But that's not necessarily the way people were to this poor man in John chapter 9. They were not interested in this man's problem. So let's look at some of the things that how people looked at this. They basically pigeonholed this man. They labeled him into a convenient category that helped them kind of overlook who he really was. Oh, he has such and such a problem. So then we don't have to really deal with that. And it's easy for us to do that. If we see someone who has a mental issue, learning disability, a physical disability, it's easy for us to kind of put them in a box and say somebody else is responsible for them and not me. And it's really hard for us to want to get involved with those people. And that was kind of the way the people were in John chapter 9. The people at that time, the disciples, saw this man as an object of a theological question. Somebody read John chapter 9, beginning in verse 2, and go down through verse 5.
And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not this man that sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the work of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming, no one can work. As long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world.
All right, so they label him. They want to know he's an oddity, and they look at him as a conundrum. Is this guy? Is he blind because he sinned? No, he couldn't be blind because he sinned, because he's been blind from birth. It's a congenital problem. So it has to be his parents. So does sin pass down from father to son? That was something that they were really struggling with. And Jesus basically answers and says, no, that's not the deal. The neighbors, they labeled him the blind man who used to sit around and beg, or at least he seemed to look like that guy. Isn't that the guy that used to sit? Look at verses 8 and 9. Somebody read that. 9 verses 8 and 9.
Neighbors, therefore, and those who previously saw him as beggar were saying, is not this the one who used to sit and beg? Others were saying, this is he. Still others were saying, no, but he is like him. He kept saying, I am the one.
So they had never really looked at this guy close enough to really know who he is. And they asked him every day. Do we know people like that? We see them every day, but yet we don't. We don't reach out to them to get to know them and the problems and struggles that they have. The Pharisees, well, we can blame the Pharisees. He was a problem to them. Look at verses 14 down through verse 16 of John chapter 9.
Now it was the Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. And the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. He said to them, he put clay on my eyes, and I wash and I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath.
So the Pharisees saw him as a problem. You know, Jesus did a miracle here on the wrong day. And we got to deal with this. If Jesus gets by with this, then everything we've been standing for about the Sabbath is out the window. And if we stand against Jesus, then the crowd is going to say that we were unfair to Jesus and unfair to this man. What about to the parents? Look at 18 down through verse 23. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of him who had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, is this your son, whom you say was born blind? How then does he now see? His parents answered to them and said, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind, but by what means he now sees, we do not know, or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He is of age. Ask him. He will speak for himself. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was the Christ, he would put them out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, he's of age, ask him. So he's an inconvenience. They didn't want to be put out of the synagogue. So they said, look, he can stand on his own 2 feet. Ask him yourself.
But
And then
Jesus
Jesus
should happy to start with. Should the Pharisees really just been talking to him?
probably should have, or talk to Jesus.
Or talk to Jesus?
Yeah.
That's right. And, you know, I left off one part of the verses, but there was other Pharisees that said, how can this man heal if he's a sinner?
Right.
They had a split vote too, so.
Yes. So Jesus sees him different than all of them. He sees this man as someone who has a problem that he can fix.
He had compassion.
Yes. So he reaches out to the man and does what is most needful. It didn't matter what day of the week it was. Here was a man that needed some help. You know, they understood that if their ox fell in the ditch on the Sabbath day, you could get him out of the ditch. What about here's somebody that's been born blind? Isn't that a big enough ox in a big enough ditch to help the man out?
Isn't a person worth more than an ox?
Huh?
Isn't a person worth more than an
Yeah,
ox?
you would think so. So we look here in chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. We see the occasion of the healing. While a number of blind people are mentioned in the gospel accounts, this is the only case where it is specifically stated that the blindness was congenital, that it was from birth. Yes, sir.
What if any, are there any theories or anything about the significance of the mud? Just curious, the mud that he put on his eye.
We're going to talk about
I know there are other connections earthwise, but I mean, what would seem to be the significance of that?
that. You want the best answer that I can come up with? I don't know. Because, you know, Jesus has, the important thing is the spit and the saliva. Jesus has used saliva to put in the ears of the deaf man. Now he uses this clay. I don't know. Jesus spit on a guy's tongue? That's kind of gross. He does that. But can you imagine this guy, and we'll get to that in just a minute, by the way. Can you imagine being born blind? It'd be different than having your sight for a while and then losing your sight, because then at least you'd have some mental snapshots to fall back on. You would know what your mama looked like. You'd know what your children looked like, or whatever else.
I have cousins that are twins. One was born totally blind, and one had enough eyesight to finish school and go through college and then teach in the blind school.
Mm-hmm.
But to hear Marilyn talk, the totally blind one, tell me, let's go see this, let me tell you what football game, what's happening on the football game. And you'd never hear it. One time my uncle said, boy, it's really thundering outside, I wish I could hear it. She said, don't worry, I can't see the lightning. But you'd never know to know her that she ever had not seen.
Not only is there this affliction, but now we come across this question: who sinned? Whose fault is it that this man is blind? I mean, he's blind from birth, so somebody has to be at fault if he's blind. You know, that seems to go all the way, and we're going to talk about this Sunday. People think that you only suffer because you've done something wrong. That was Job's brothers, his friends' problem. They thought, surely you've sinned against God, otherwise none of this would have happened. Well, that is not necessarily so. Yes, sir.
I would enlighten just for those of you here, I'll give you a quick anatomy lesson. The eyes themselves are invagination, ectopic invagination of skin. It's outer skin. This isn't something that comes from within your body. This is an invagination of like skin that turns into the eye embryologically. So if you're born without eyes or blindness, it means that ectopic, that invagination of skin that would be around your face, did not go in and form the eye at the direction embryologically.
And that happens very early in the
Yeah,
process.
that's in the first few days of embryological development. Now, I don't know whether that clears up that. It may clear up the question of being born blind, and that is that this is way, way, way back when you're looking at a fetus that's only this long.
Mhm.
So,
Well, if you look at any embryo, I don't care if it's a fish, a frog, a human being, the big dark spot is usually an eyeball that's developing from the tiniest part. Their
but
eyes
it's from
are-
the outside,
Yeah.
outside skin. It doesn't come
Right.
from inside. It's that.
But it's one of the very first things.
It's not mesodermal skin. It is ectodermal.
You can see it happen. And then secondly, the motivation for the healing is interesting to me. It was for the glorification. Jesus said it's not that anybody sinned. The whole purpose of this particular man being born blind is so that people could see the healing and glorify God. It's not some kind of divine penalty for sin, either this man's or his parents. So sometimes we might go through some kind of suffering and it have nothing to do with anything that we've done or our parents have done. But it can be to the glory of God how we handle that particular thing. The man would be healed so that the world would know that Jesus was the Son of God. Remember, the whole purpose that John wrote the gospel was so that people could believe in Jesus and have life in his name. Yes, sir.
God took that skin that didn't go internally and to the eye socket and made the eye. That's what God did. The miracle was that he made the
Because
eye.
he may not have had eyes at all.
He may not have had, but God actually made
That's interesting.
eyes for him, period.
So the next point, besides glorification, it's certification. Jesus claims what? That I'm the light of the world. It proves who he is. It's the same thing that Jesus does by using the terms, I am the way, I am the bread of life, I am the resurrection and the life. He states that he is God. And now in this healing, this miraculous healing of somebody who is born blind, is an amazing thing that only God could do. There's no way that anyone else could do that. And then the action of healing itself, it was a physical operation. It's quite difficult, like we said, not to mention as a secondary matter what this saliva thing is all about. I don't know. But it does have to do with Jesus taking an initiative. It brings us back to the deaf man in Mark chapter 8 and the blind man at Bethesda. However, in both of these instances, the spittle was applied directly. Here, there is a mixture, a mud pack, however it was applied.
Doesn't it kind of lead to the idea that it was mud?
Maybe you made a mud
Pie, and they couldn't claim that it had healing powers or
Yeah.
anything. It was, they maybe saw it pick up the dirt off the ground, and they couldn't claim.
Makes me think back to creation.
Yes.
God created man
right out of the dirt.
right out of the dirt.
Right. But, I think, Bill, maybe you can hold on with this. If you look back to Jewish law, any excrement from a human being is unclean. And therefore, it's dirty, and you can't have any connection with it at all. The Lord took what everyone considered to be unclean and dirty and used it as a means to bless this man to heal.
I think the connection there is that in spit or any mucous membrane type thing, it has the man's DNA. It has the Lord's DNA in it. And so the Lord took that DNA and made whatever he was going to make with the DNA, even if it was only a tiny part of a drop.
Yeah.
He could take it, from the Lord and give it to him and make what he wanted. And he did.
Very
That
interesting.
was the miracle.
I'm surprised you women haven't made this major point. Every kid in the world, anything that's wrong with them, what do? You kiss them. If they're dirty, you lick them and clean it off. With dirty spit out of your mouth, you clean your child. And that's what Jesus did. Don't you think everybody at that surrounding saw this man as dirty? A lot of times we see people that are, we almost see people with disadvantage and disability as being less than human, and maybe they're even dirty, and we don't want to be around them. We try to stay clear of those people, and that's sad that we seem to be that way. But that seems to be the case, and so Jesus actually is pushing this idea out that this man is not dirty at all. And we'll have to take up there next week. Y'all just talk too much. I'm glad. I appreciate the input. It makes the class much more interesting. Do you have bingo tonight, Brother Pete? I see you standing up.
I've got it now.
Okay.
We
Not
have,
yet. You have bingo?
well, this is somebody who's plays membership.
Okay,
I think that's great.
okay. Well, come on with it then.
First, I'll stand right here. This is Tiffany Benson. If you haven't met her grandmother, Sarah Benson, they're placing membership. with us.
Great.
Amen.
Her daughter, where's,
He's
Brad,
up here.
there's Brad, they're down there, so y'all get to meet them.
Yes. They've been here several
Several
weeks.
times.
It's great. It's great to have them.
Glad to have you here.
And they all have such sweet smiles. All right, brother, seat up. What's your invitation song? 336. Go ahead and leave. I gotta go see that.
We'll find out how old you are today, on tonight, talking on the Devo. How many of you remember where you were when Kennedy was assassinated?
I was, you know where you are?
You know, Kennedy's assassination was a hardship, I think, on America, and a lot of sad time for America. But the one thing I never heard at that time was that it was the end game. It was the end of time. And when 9/11 in 21, when they flew the planes into the Twin Towers, there's a lot on TV and read about people predicting this is the end. This is the end of the world coming soon. And it was a prediction of the end time, which wasn't there when Kennedy was assassinated. And, they are doing the same thing right now, I believe, with the war that's going on between Russia and Ukraine. There's a lot on television and a lot in the newspaper and everything about the end time and the end of the world. And this is leading up to it. But if we stay with what our Bible tells us, it's not the end time.
Yeah.
Because we don't know when the end time's going to be. Only the Father in heaven knows. Jesus says in Matthew 24, verse 36, but of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only in heaven. He's the only one that knows. So all the prediction and everything about the end time, I don't know why we like to try to guess events or come up with a time that we might know something that no one else knows, but no one knows but God when the end time is. So we need to pray for those folks in Ukraine. I sometimes say I'm thankful, and I am thankful to live in America, but I have been, there's sometimes I think it'll never happen here, that a war like that would never happen. You know, George Washington said he didn't fear a foreign country coming in and invading America and taking it over. But that was a long time ago, and it's totally different now than it was then. Because back then, they was armed. All the people was armed. But it could happen to us. I pray it never does. There is a lot of suffering and pain and innocent people being killed in Ukraine. And why are we doing this? Why is that going on? Money and power. That's all it is. Money and power. Somebody wanting power. I think it's a sad day when we get so far away from God that we think we can take over the world and be one world government and leave God out. I think that's the one thing in America that we have. It's Christian. We love Jesus and we pray to God and serve God. And I think that's the one thing that we have that we have been free all this time. He has kept us, guided us to where we have had freedom. As we go about our daily lives, we need to remember the people in Ukraine, and we need to remember why we're here on this earth. And it's not to gain money and power, but it's to serve God and to tell other people about the love of Jesus and bring them to Christ. We need to be telling our neighbors and our friends and inviting them into our Lord's church and our Lord's family. I think we have a great family here at NorthLoop. A lot of loving, caring people. And I think we need to share that with people outside of our church. They need to see what we see when we're in here. Somehow we need to invite them in, and they need to see you people in action, caring and guiding and loving. When there's a job to be done, you're always there to do it. And I'm thankful for that. That's all I have. If you have any needs or need the prayers of the church or want to be baptized, well, if you'll come forward as we stand and sing.
When can it be that I should